Welcome to Clydesdale Media. Fueled by C4, Cellucor, and Extend. Use the code Clydesdale to get 20% off at checkout at c4energy.com. On Clydesdale Media, where we bring you the widest array of content here on our YouTube channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notifier so you're the first to know when new episodes are available. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Clydesdale Media Podcast. My name is Scott Schweitzer. I'm the Clydesdale. I am so honored and privileged to have with me fellow Ohioan, Olivia Sulek.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to do this. I've prayed a lot over the last couple years about how I can use this platform to share my story, to share God's word in that way, right? And I thought this was a nice way to kind of step into it and let people know my beliefs and yours as well. So I want to preface this first. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Second, I want to preface this so people understand when we get to the decision, how hard that decision was.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were on with us about, oh my gosh, the comments are already rolling in. And so what I wanted to say is you were a really good CrossFit athlete.
Thank you.
You were the teen champion in 2018 in the 14, 15-year-old division. In 2021, you went head to head with Emma Lawson to finish 1-2 at the games. You finished second to Emma. And that's kind of about the time I met you. And then I saw you at 22.2 at Rogue. You were there to support Emma. And got to chat with you there with your mom. Yep. Your mom is awesome.
Thank you. She's going to love hearing that from me so much.
She introduced herself to me at the MAC 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And then we run into each other at things all the time because even though you've taken a step back, you and her still go to events.
Yeah, my mom is still a huge CrossFit fangirl, so she's going to be at semis in Orlando. She'll come to the games. We'll cheer Emma and the rest of the Brute crew and everyone else on.
So at that point, we had you and your coach at the time on the show, and then you had made the decision to leave and move to Naples.
Yes.
Right after I had you on, almost. I think we had you on, you did the syndicate, and then you finished 10th at the syndicate.
Okay.
And then right after that's when you made the decision, correct?
Yeah, so I made the decision about mid-June.
Okay. Yeah. And that was May, right? So
yeah, syndicate was in May.
Yeah. So I watched you perform at the syndicate. You were, I think, 19 at the time.
I was 18 at the time of the syndicate.
Okay. Even better. You were 18 at the time. You finished 10th at semis. Top 10 finish, 18 years old. And I'm only doing this not to like brag on you, even though you've done great. I want the people to know where you were in the sport and what you had in front of you when you got the call. Right?
Yeah.
So you moved to Naples, and then I've just seen you off and on from that point on, right?
Yes.
Walk us through why the choice to move to Naples.
Okay.
And then you got a roommate, which I want to hear who's the better foosball player.
Okay, we can get into that, but I'm sad to say I have yet to win a game. We've only played 2, but my roommate has gotten the best of me.
Okay, so walk us through why the decision to move to Naples at the time, and then we'll get into some other things from that.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it should flow because it's also connected, which I feel like that's been the coolest thing to see God work from this move. So I made the decision in June to move, and I ended up moving in July. And it was in April of 2022 where my old coach, Nick Simpson, still love him. He is an absolutely amazing man. Advanced me so far in my CrossFit career and in my life. He actually brought me down here to train in Naples for a week. And the environment was, I knew this is where I needed to be. I loved Emma Carey. I loved James. I loved Dallin. And that was kind of like the core group at the time. And just their like intentionality and how much they wanted to win. So that's originally like what drew me down here. And I basically knew when I was here in April, Emma and I laugh at this all the time. I was down there. We kind of joked about like me moving down there and us living together. And we were both totally joking about it, or we thought each other was joking, but we were both totally serious the whole time. So I kind of knew right then in that moment, I wanted to make the move. But with semis approaching, I wasn't going to change anything. I didn't want to do that to my current coach and didn't want to throw that on Matt and Dom. So I waited till after semis, took 10th, which obviously I wanted to qualify to the games. And I was in a game spot until event 5, which was a version of Jackie. So it was in June where it was just like kind of after semis, I kind of had the deload, taking some time off since that was the end of my season. I gave Matt a call, or I sent him a text like, can you hop on a call? And he's like, I would love to. He obviously knew what I was going to talk to him about. He said that he would love to have me. I then went and talked to Nick right after that conversation happened. And less than a month later, I moved to Naples. And I didn't know I was moving until like the day before. We had like this plan. We didn't really have a plan. It was just kind of like a general idea of like when I was going to move. The pieces weren't fitting together. And CrossFit actually asked me to test the games workouts in Columbus, like less than 2 hours away. And I was getting ready to do that. And it was the day before I was supposed to leave. I like minorly tweaked my back. Nothing serious, but enough to be like, I don't want to risk my future season because of a back injury and then maybe doing something stupid. So I decided not to go. Well, that next day, my parents and brother and sister were leaving for Atlanta for my brother's baseball tournament. And that's when we kind of like put pieces together. Like Atlanta's like halfway to Florida from Ohio. So I like packed up that night and then we were on the road 6 a.m. and just like going full-fledged to Florida.
Wow. So like you decided you're going to go and 24 hours later you were on the road.
It was, I think, so I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was maybe a Tuesday night is when the idea was thrown out. And then Wednesday night, I started packing. We confirmed, and yeah, Thursday morning, I was out on the road 6 a.m.
Okay. So you're heading to Naples.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you going to live?
Yeah.
Did you and Emma talk before you moved? Was that going to happen? Did it take a little while for you guys to become roommates?
Yeah, we talked about a little bit before I moved because we both, I think I kind of asked her, like sent her a text, I was like, hey, like, were you kind of serious about like maybe moving in together? She's like, yes. But she was in a lease until November of 2022. So I really didn't have a place to stay at first. And we found like a friend of a friend. My mom found someone on Facebook that we just like rented a room out of her house. So I did that when I got here in July. And I was planning on staying there all the way until December or whenever Emma got out of her lease. And then it was in September, the hurricane came through Southwest Florida. And where I was staying was very close to the water and it got hit with pretty significant water damage. So like I could no longer live there. So I lived with Nate for a week as I figured out what I was going to do. And then Dom, who was my coach, or who was my coach down here in Naples, like took me into his spare bedroom. And so I lived with him and his amazing wife, Olivia, for a little over 2 months. And just like that time was 100% planned by God. Just the conversation, the late night theology conversations we would have, the laughs, probably like 2 of my favorite months, just my entire life. And then in December, Emma and I moved in together.
Okay. And you're still living together today and buying foosball tables.
We're still living together.
Oh.
today in impulse buying foosball tables.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's like an episode of Friends.
It 100% is. I think that's how the idea got thrown out. The idea was thrown out seriously 4 days ago. It came 2 days ago, and we assembled it yesterday. So it all happened very fast. But Friends is like my comfort show. I think I've watched it like 10 times through. And I don't know how it happened. We were talking about like air hockey randomly, and then foosball, and then I mentioned the episode of Friends, and we just kind of looked at each other and was like, let's do it.
Is it your dining room table? If it is, that's...
No, it is not, which is like what I like. We already had one. But I did throw that idea out there as well.
Cool. So you were working out with Brood at the time, and I've had Matt on the show before, and he talks about how groups of you work out at different times during the day. Like you have like your little workout group.
Yeah.
And so it was coming like, I don't know how to say this, but like it's not a rumor, but people were talking about your group being the God Squad.
Okay, the God Squad. I haven't heard that one before.
Right. And so one is that I think that is accurate, knowing who the people that are in your crew. Two, do you take offense to that at all, or do you like it as a description?
So in that first, so my coach is actually Dom. Dom and Matt, they worked together, and like Matt was there if Dom was gone, or if I just like needed Matt's advice for something, I would go to Matt, and vice versa. They go to Dom as well. But in that first group was me, Emma, Nate, and then Harper, when she worked from home. And then in that second group was James, Dallin, Danielle, and Fee when she got down here. And James is like very strong in his faith, although like he was in the second group. And so at first I took, like when I first heard that, I like took offense, like for maybe like half a second. And then I was like, who am I kidding? Like these people can like see that. Like I was like, that's amazing. Like that's what I want to be known for. So no, I didn't take offense. I'm like, I will wear the religious group or God Squad so proudly, because like that's what I want to live for. And Emma and Harper have been like two like key figures in like helping me grow in my faith and like growing alongside with them.
Yeah. So Kenneth DeLapp says, I'm Team God Squad.
Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate that.
So that's funny you say that, because there was a point in my life, and I look at my faith journey as I've been with Jesus since I've been a kid. I was raised in the church.
Okay.
I almost became a pastor coming out of high school. I talked to my pastor about that. And then there's been times in my life where I didn't like abandon Jesus, but I turned him down.
Okay.
Turn the volume down. So like, and not intentionally, like life just comes at you. And there was a time where someone said to me, I didn't know you were a Christian. And I was like, that hit me like square between the eyes. And I was like, then I am doing something wrong.
Yes. I had a very similar moment.
If you can't tell I'm a Christian, then I'm not living the right life.
Yes. 100%.
So, So go ahead with how did that, you said that happened to you?
I would say it wasn't so this was, it was a longer time ago, maybe 2 years at this time, but I was just like sitting in my room, scrolling through Instagram. And I was like, if you found me on Instagram, like the first thing you would see is Olivia the CrossFitter. And that like hit me at my core. Like that is not what I want to be known for, which is like one of my struggles with CrossFit was like Instagram was basically like just like building a platform and like for yourself and like glorifying yourself. And that's how you get known. That's how you get sponsors, like building that page. And that was just something like I was never super like fond of. So in that moment it hit me, and that's when I tried to like make more posts, including my faith. but it really was. So I would say that was maybe 2 years ago, but it wasn't until I really like moved down here, obviously, you know, because that kind of led to my decision to step away, that I would say like my faith like really, really like blossomed.
So let's take a step back.
Okay.
How were you raised? If faith wise?
Yeah. So Catholic growing up, maybe till I was in like second grade. So I just have like very faint memories. And then we started to go to a Christian church when I want to say around like second grade, and up until like middle school, like we were very like an off and on family. Like we would all like call ourselves Christian, but very often on like, I honestly like don't remember like much of like that experience, like up until really into high school. It was off and on. If there was something more important or what we considered more important, like a sporting event, we would go to that. And with like my older sister doing gymnastics, my younger brother doing baseball and basketball, like we were always busy on Sunday. So I just have like very like faint memories. And honestly, I had no relationship with Jesus, didn't really understand much at all, although I would have like identified myself as Christian.
Yeah. I remember a sermon when I first moved to Columbus where a pastor talked about that specific thing, that people identify as a Christian,
Oh my, yes.
but not, but do not truly live that life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was another wake up call for me. Right. Because I have a similar story. Like I'm at the age of 25, I moved to Florida.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll get into that in a minute, because I think we're going to go down a similar path there. And I kind of fell away from the church when I was in Florida because I couldn't find a church home that made sense to me. It was more ritualistic as opposed to a true relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I fell off, thinking that I can do this on my own because they're not helping me get there. And I could never find the church that could help me there. Now, when I moved to Ohio, all that kind of changed and I found the right place for me. I found 3 places as we moved around the city that have been awesome. But yeah, so you don't really remember why you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up. What was the turning point?
So it was around 2019. The games that year was like really tough, and it was because Emma over there won. And she won the open and won the qualifier, and I just had won every stage before. And I definitely was like putting my identity in that. And like I was finding my satisfaction in that. And you're winning, nothing else matters in the world. So it was in that 2019 season. I struggled. I took 4th at the games. Where like mentally, I was just like really going through it. I can remember like the night before the games, just like sitting outside the house, like with Nick, like crying just because of like the mental just stress, like an anxiety I was going through. And so it was right after then, that time, I'm like, I want like some sort of like peace. And that's when I remember I opened like my Bible for the first time. Or maybe not the first time, but like I was like, I'm like gonna actually like try and like do this. And I think it literally started with like Googling like how to read the Bible and like working through it then. And then it was like January 1st of 2020. I remember like I made a post on Instagram. I think that was the first one like where I like shared my faith, and I have grown like so much since that January 1st post. But I was like, I made a commitment to myself. Like I am not going to miss a church service, even if I need to watch it online. Because like, I was training at the time on Sundays, but that's kind of like when I made like that vow to myself. And from there, it's just been like a steady journey up.
And then God said, I'm going to really test her, and I'm going to make a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like that affected me too much. I mean, I was already doing like online school, and Nick lived like down the street from me. So we had just had like a basement, gym in our basement. So he would just like come over every day. And honestly, like, I loved it. Like, I still did my online school, and I just got to spend like hours with like one-on-one my coach every day. We would have like people like come over, work out. I thought it was kind of like a fun time as I prepped for the games.
So you start your relationship with Jesus at that point. You're
Mm-hmm.
reading the Bible. And it was it all like that epiphany when you said, I'm identifying all this with winning and being a CrossFitter, and I need to change that to help my own anxiety. And so you reached for this answer, and the answer was Jesus.
So I would never say that there was like one pivotal moment like at that time. I would say there's like, it was very much a steady like journey at that time. It was all just kind of like the same of like trying to learn, like trying to go. But I'd say even in that time, I wasn't like doing anything like crazy, but I would say my life still didn't. I would, if you would have asked, like would have not been willing to give everything up at that time. I still very much would have lived like the world, dressed like the world, you know, talked, maybe even listened to some of like the same music. And then it wasn't really until I moved down here where I would say I had just kind of more of like those moments where I realized like what I want to live for. And like, I don't think I really learned like what Christianity is and following Jesus is until I moved down here. Not to say I wasn't like a Christian before. Like, I still believe that I was like saved before I moved down to Naples, but down here is like really where that growth happened.
And what was it about Naples? What I'm assuming it was the people.
Yeah. It was
So
my,
what?
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Oh,
No, I was gonna say what people dove into your life that made you see things differently.
well, the number one would be my coach, Dom. And like, if I think about it like too hard, like, I will seriously cry. Because so I originally, like I said, like I reached out to Matt, because I had only met Dom like once before that. It was like when I came to visit the week, he like helped me like with ring muscle ups, like maybe one time. But I reached out to Matt because I wanted Matt to coach me, because Matt coached Emma, Matt coached James, Matt coached Dallin. So I asked Matt to be on the call or to call, you know, because I want to talk about moving down here and training with him. And he's like, yep, but Dom will be on the call too. So I'm like, great. And on that call, they're like, we want Dom to take your lead. And like, honestly, I love Matt to death. Okay. I would classify him as a good friend of mine, but I was kind of like, I lost my train of thought. I was like a little disappointed that they wanted me with Dom, but I didn't like second guess it because I was like, I just want to be down in Florida. And now to like see how like intentional that was for like me to be working with Dom, like how that relationship came to be, and then getting to live with him and his wife. He has 100% been the biggest like spiritual mentor, like in my life. He's really changed my life. And then the other one would probably be my good friend Harper, who I mentioned she trains with us. She does CrossFit as well. She has been like one of my absolute best friends, like mentors down here, probably knows me better than anyone and has seen all of my sides.
So what was it about the life that Dom and his wife led that you witnessed that you said, man, I've got to have some of that?
It's just, if you're in Dom and Olivia, his wife's name's Olivia as well. If you're in their presence, like you feel like so loved. If their house is the house, like their door's always open. If you knock on the door, you will get yelled at. They just want you to come in. They always have people in. They are so like loving and welcoming and so intentional. Like if I'm having like a rough night, like I know I can call Olivia or Dom and they will pick up like that and talk through things with me. Dom, like they led a Bible study at that time. I think it was Emma, Harper, and James. And they like invited me that my first week. And I would say I'm a really big like questions person. And I had never had anyone like go through the Bible with me. So we're going through this and I'm just like flooded with so many like questions. And Dom would sit with me for no joke hours as we like figure things out one by one, I would come with like a notebook full of notes, and I would just talk to him for hours. I would like I would yell at him for hours, and I would like clap in his face. And I just like to say I'm very passionate. And just how like he never gave up. Harper never gave up. Olivia like loved me throughout that whole thing. She let me talk to her husband about theology till 1 a.m. if that's what it took. So yeah.
So you were very much like the conversion of Saul to Paul.
Okay.
In the New Testament, where he just so he went from killing Christians as a Roman.
Yeah, I was like that deep.
Well, and so I do that sometimes where I process out loud and it doesn't come across the way I want. But no, I didn't think you were killing Christians. No, not at all. But when he discovered the relationship value with Jesus, he dove in the deep end and wanted to know everything he could possibly know and spread the word to as many people as he could spread the word.
Mm-hmm.
So during this time, you're chatting with Dom until 1 a.m.
Yep.
You're trying to train as a competitive athlete.
Yep.
At what point did the scale break where you're like, I can't do both?
Yeah. So I can remember very vividly, it was Thanksgiving Day, and it was the Friday before Thanksgiving. So I think that was the 18th of November. I just had like a hard training day, and I would kind of just have like, sporadic bad training days where I would just kind of get like so like mentally like flustered and like filled with like anxiety that I could not work out. Like I wanted to, just like I physically felt like I couldn't move my body. I couldn't think. So it happened on Friday. I remember like I set out, I was like literally walking around the gym for hours. It's, it's a small gym area, and I'm like pacing for hours, and then I go outside. Harper tried to come out and talk to me, and she can usually talk to me pretty well, but I'm like, I couldn't say anything. Dom eventually, he's like, I came inside, and I'm just like, I'm crying. I like really had no idea what was wrong. And Dom, he's like, I'll put your stuff away. Just go. So I left, came back the next day. I think I was able to like train okay on that Saturday. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was basically 3 days of that same exact thing happening. Like trying to get in the gym and just like couldn't go. I qualified for Wadapalooza. I took second. In that like online qualifier. I was the fittest that I had ever been. I remember doing like a workout like from quarterfinals last year, and like I PR'd by like a minute. So like things were like getting better, but I just like I couldn't get through training this week. And I remember like trying to redo like one of the Wadapalooza online qualifier workouts. I was getting ready for Wadapalooza, pacing around with him for like 2 hours. Starting a minute in, I like threw the dumbbells down. So like I just can't. I had like a hour zone 2 that I was supposed to do after that. And I remember like sitting on the bike, like I could do an hour zone 2, and like felt like my legs like physically like couldn't move. So I left. I came back, I was able to do the zone 2. This is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then on like Thanksgiving night, I had a conversation with Harper that kind of like led me, I didn't tell her in that moment, but led me to think like, I don't feel like I am where I am supposed to be. It just felt like it almost felt like that bad week, like all that anxiety was like God's way of like waking me up. Like, you're not like we're supposed to be, like you're living like in like disobedience to like where I'm like calling you to be. And it was almost something like the thoughts were like built up. Like I would have like random thoughts that were like, I don't know if like CrossFit's for me. Like I'm not getting like satisfaction. Like I'm not getting like what I want. And it just like reached the point of like that night, like irresistibility, where I had that thought, and it's like where it felt real for the first time. Because like thoughts come in all the time. You like want to quit workouts all the time. You want to give up all the time. But I would say like that. So I would always, when I would have those thoughts about not doing CrossFit anymore, I would always just kind of put it into that category of, me trying to take it easy. But I would say that was the first time like it felt real, and I feel like I could trust my thought. So I got home that night. Just like after that conversation with Harper talked about her life. It was really just like me listening. It was Harper talking about her life that made me realize I don't feel like where I'm supposed to be. So it was that night. My whole training week was absolutely horrible. So I just sent Dom a text. I was living with him at the time, but he was asleep when I got back. I was like, I'm not going into the gym tomorrow. I need a day. So Dom was amazing. He's like, yep. He sent me to a park to walk, and I walked a few miles there, just like went to coffee shops and read and journaled. And it was like in that moment where I was like, I like know what I need to do. And just that whole week leading up was so intentional. Even like Thanksgiving Day, Emma's mom had me over, and it was like me, DC, who's a brute coach, Harper, Emma, and Marla, which is Emma's mom. And I remember like we were kind of going around like what's been everyone's favorite part of Naples, and DC goes the people, Marla goes the people, like Olivia, what about you? And I'm like, well, the people. And then I go on for like 30 minutes about how much the people here have changed my life and how intentional God has been in this move. And I can like vividly remember saying that night, this was before my conversation with Harper, if like CrossFit was taken away from me tomorrow, like this move would still be worth it. So I remember like saying that night, having like other conversations just like throughout the week, those rough training days, it all kind of like surmounted into this, like, I don't feel like CrossFit is like where I'm supposed to be. And so that was that Friday after Thanksgiving. It's like, I feel like when I confirmed the decision in my head, and then it was that next day someone drew it out of me.
So Kenneth says, wow, I'm going through some of this myself lately. So I'm so glad you're sharing your story.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One thing I wanted to share with you, when I moved to Florida, I was living in Pennsylvania at the time.
Okay.
It's where I grew up. I actually met a man who was a former pastor.
Okay.
And we just like sat and chatted, very much like you described what you and Dom did. Like I would ask questions, and theologically he was much more mature than I was.
Okay.
Again, I was like 25 years old at the time. And I felt I was very depressed and stuck in this spot. And I said to him, like, I just don't know what to do. And he said, God can only steer a moving ship. And that has been my mantra ever since that moment. Like everything I did was you have to move toward God for him to be able to help steer you in the way that he wants you to go. And when I left for Florida, everything worked out. Like I'd have, $300 in the bank, and what I needed for a deposit on an apartment was $300. Like it was everything like that the whole way there. And it was, my wife and I moved to Florida. We packed up everything. We couldn't afford to even take it with us. And we had our parents UPS us our stuff bit by bit as we could like afford for them to send it. And I think that those months and years made my wife and I so much. She left the Catholic Church.
Okay.
She became a Protestant at that point, like everything. And then I hear your story of moving to Naples, and like you kept saying like it was in the plan.
Oh,
it was in the plan. Like every step along the way seems the same way.
Yeah. You keep going.
No. I want to go back to the part where you said you were at that moment where you realized, but someone had to draw it out of you.
Yeah. So it was, Friday I made that decision. Then Saturday I just like went back to the gym. Like nothing happened. Dom knew I was like going through it. But he like very graciously like gave me my time. And so he gave me a pretty easy workout on Saturday. One session, I was able to get through it. I remember it was like biking, maybe some easy lifting. And then it was that Saturday, I can remember, I'm living with them at the time, and I'm just sitting, like chatting with Olivia, and Dom's wife, Olivia, on the couch. And, she just knew I was kind of going through a hard time, like wasn't really saying anything. Dom was there, wasn't really saying anything. All of a sudden, like the door opens and like Harper walks in. I mentioned Harper Locke. She really has been like such a big figure in my life. But she walks in and like, I wasn't expecting her to come. And honestly, like I was really disappointed. She walked in because she knew she was the one I had the conversation with Thursday night. She knew I was crying. She knew I took the day out. Like I knew I would have to tell her that night. So Dom and Olivia ended up leaving. They had somewhere to be. And it took me 4 hours to get it out. Like, cause you know, it's real. Like once you put it out there the first time, it was a lot of silence, a lot of like questioning, a lot of and I told her and she like knew. I remember her saying like, I know what you're gonna say, but like I need you to like say it. And then a very similar thing like happened with Dom, like on Monday. So I sent him a text. So Harper's like, you need to tell Dom. So on Sunday, I sent Dom a text. Can we talk tomorrow? So on Monday, I trained, was able to get through it. And we talked like 3 hours, same thing. Very hard to say, a lot of silence, tears. And he's like, he also said like, I know what you're going to say. You just need to say it. Like it was, those two people knew me the best. So they weren't like, they knew what I was going through. And it's really cool. I remember Dom saying like the same Holy Spirit that's like in you is like in me. And like, I've seen you in here. And I guess that day I was out at the gym, Harper and Dom were like talking like CrossFit's like killing her. So they kind of like knew before I told them. And then like all my conversations from there, I like then like, you know, told my parents, talked to Matt, told like James and Emma. I think everyone was like not expecting for me to like say that, especially like you said, like the trajectory, like my season was going, like I fully believe I could have qualified at the games this year. But no one was like surprised. They weren't like expecting, but like knowing who I was, and, like just kind of like watching me grow throughout the past months, they weren't surprised. Everyone was like so loving and like so supportive, which, you know, I was afraid to have these conversations, especially with Matt, because so many people like want to be here in Naples. Like I was given this opportunity and a few months in, I'm like, sorry, like I'm stepping away.
So you said everybody was supportive.
Yeah.
Was that pretty much across the board?
Yeah, I would say not everyone necessarily got it, but everyone was so supportive. And, you know, I don't expect everyone to get it. And, like, you know, I don't expect, like, everyone, like, I got way more support, actually, than, like, I expected. Like, my parents are the most supportive people ever. They just, like, want me to be happy. So, yeah, it was just mostly support across the board, even when people, like, didn't fully understand. Or people had mean things to say, they just kind of kept it in. And I'm unaware of it.
So Jody's asking, this all happened Thanksgiving 2022.
Yeah, so it was that like last week in November is like when I made the decision. And I didn't post about it for like a month, but like that month, like I wasn't training. I was, you know, trying to like figure life out like before I like made a public announcement. But it was cool to see, like, it wasn't just that week. Like I said, I felt like it was kind of like building up, and it was that last week of November, like reached the point of like irresistibility.
So I think one of the questions that probably popped up from your friends, family, whoever is, why can't you do both?
Mm-hmm. That is something like I want to like preface by saying like my goal in doing this is not to get everyone to quit CrossFit. I 100% believe that you can glorify God in all things. And I am so grateful that God used something as silly as CrossFit to reach me, because I don't think I'd be making this decision. I don't feel like I'd be stepping into like where God is like calling me to be if it was not for CrossFit, if it was not for even the timing of the move, how it happened. And then working with Dom, living with Dom, everything was so intentional. And so I am so grateful. Like it makes me want to cry, like thanking God for he used something as silly as CrossFit. So I by no means want to like use this to like tell everyone that they need to quit CrossFit. I love Emma. You know, I'm not trying to convince her to quit CrossFit. I'm her biggest cheerleader now. But for me, I did not like the person that CrossFit necessarily made me to be. I had an ego. I had pride. It filled me up with so much anxiety. I was caring about things so much that honestly, in the grand scheme of life, do not matter at all. Like nothing in this like life, like it doesn't matter. And so I was just so caught up in that. So much of my time And I can remember when I went home for Christmas, I got together with a friend who I haven't known her for super long. We've only actually hung out like a few times together. She was kind of like going through some things, and I just was like trying to be a good like role model for her. I knew like she didn't really have a faith. And I didn't like push on her. I didn't like talk to her about it, but you know, she followed me on Instagram and she knew who I was. So we got together for coffee, and she all of a sudden like brings up that she like started to go to church. And that was like really like as in depth, like as we got. But the joy that I felt of someone like not knowing Jesus, like starting to go to church and like get in a relationship with him, the amount of joy I felt in that simple conversation of a friend who I haven't known that long, who I haven't spent that much time with, I was filled up with so much joy, more joy than I ever got from like completing a workout well, more joy than I've gotten qualifying to semis, or that I would have even felt, I believe, qualifying to the games. And I'm like, I want to pursue that. Like, I want, like, CrossFit is not going to give me like what I am looking for in life. And yes, you can glorify God in CrossFit. I just do not feel like that was my best place to do so.
Okay. Is it safe to say that CrossFit created an imbalance in your life? And it's something that you had to like, because you still work out, right? Like,
So, I mean,
you're,
so that was like, it was really hard for me, like to be in the gym and not be like competitive with it. Like when I first stopped, I would like just try to keep a rhythm of going to the gym. For the last like 2 months, I've been like totally out of it. Very, very irregular. So just like last week, I talked to Emma and she started like write workouts for me. So I've been in just like 3 times the past like few days, like trying to get like back into a rhythm because it is hard. And I like Dom, actually, he went through something very similar where like he was competitive with it, and like I think his goal was like to qualify to like regionals or like whatever it was at the time, semifinal. And he kind of had like a very similar thing, and like he stopped competing, and like he has like a really hard time going to the gym. Like I don't like the thought patterns that it makes me. Like CrossFit isn't a sin, but like it can like cause me to fall into like some sinful patterns at times and obsess about things and put so much energy and effort into things that ultimately like don't that I didn't want to be spending there.
Gosh, I love the way you explain that because
Yeah.
it makes sense to me, right? Because on the surface, I can look at other CrossFitters who are
Mhm.
glorifying God through the use of their notoriety that they get from CrossFit. But if it's making an imbalance and giving you sinful thoughts and sinful
Mhm.
ideas, then it's not the place for you to be.
No, and like it just like it wasn't. I hated building a platform for myself. I hated that. I hated the amount of like time. I hated the thought patterns it was pushing me to. And I knew like yes, I could like glorify God, but I just didn't feel like with the gifts and the talents that I've been given, it was my best like place to do so. Like it wasn't the satisfaction like I wanted. Like it wasn't like I knew I would not be satisfied like qualifying like to the games. It was just I started CrossFit when I was 11 and I was really good at it. And I was like, this is just like this is what I am going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like Jody says here, you're a strong young woman in more ways than one.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
and I think like making that decision is your commitment to be a great CrossFitter was took a mindset and an ability to sacrifice other things in your life to do that. To do what you're doing now is even a bigger sacrifice, but for a greater glory.
Yeah. I would say like I was just like talking to Emma about this, like a question. I'd like just listened to something on the way back to the apartment by John Piper, and he was like asking, he was like telling a story, and he mentioned the question like, how much is Jesus worth? And I feel like for me, that's been it. Like I've realized the worth of Jesus, and man, how unworthy I am for him, and I don't want anything else. I just want to live fully for him. I don't care what it costs. But I want to like live fully for him. And I wasn't doing that in CrossFit. And I mentioned like in my like CrossFit post, like, or in the post I made when I was stepping away from CrossFit, like I would rather be wrong running towards what I believe God is calling me to than like living a life like comfortably, but in disobedience. And I just felt like it may not be comfortable. I'm going to lose things. I don't know what I'm doing next. Like, I think that was so hard. It's like, I'm stopping CrossFit for what? Like, I really still don't know exactly what is next. But it's like, there is no greater joy than like when you're walking with Christ. Like, and that has been the absolute most freeing thing, to like be able to like walk with him. And I was kind of like talking to Emma right before this about like some of the things that like, when I had this like conversation with her where I told her like, hey, like, I'm not doing CrossFit anymore. And like, she was so sweet. I think we both cried. But she was kind of telling me like what stuck out from that conversation. And there was like a moment like here where I realized like, why did God like do all these things for me? Like, why did he help me move down to Naples? Like, why? Like, it's so easy to see, like, he so intentionally pursued me. Like, he chose me. And I was like wrestling with this, like, well, like, why did he choose me? Like, why am I like given all like these blessings? Like, what about other people? What about other people? And it's like, I don't know why God chose me. I don't know the answer to these questions, but what I want to do is I want to live my life in like full obedience, submission, and worship to him. And I think like that's like what made my decision final, was like, I don't have all of the answers and I don't necessarily know what's next, but I just want to live completely for him in worship and obedience, even if other people think it's silly, even, no matter what people think.
Gosh, I have so many questions after that last statement.
Sorry,
But while I'm thinking,
on for a little bit.
Andrew Sten, who is a fellow Cincinnatian,
Okay, let's go.
Olivia's more mature at her age than many people twice her age.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but thank you.
And then Jody says, what are you doing now to glorify God in your life? And I think you answered that kind of, that you don't know what God is calling you to do. You just know he's calling you.
So there's definitely been like some ideas, and like I said, CrossFit is all I know. And I did online school for CrossFit. I didn't go to college. So like after CrossFit, like I put like really all of my eggs in like this basket. So to step away like was like crazy, because it's like what I kind of like worked for. I know I'm only 19, but it's like what I worked for like for my life so far. And so when I stopped, it was like, I'm just gonna try to say yes to things, and just kind of like see what like God will work through it. So it's been great. Like I work part-time. I like do administrative work at a pregnancy resource center right now, which they're like an amazing ministry, which I've like really loved to do that. It's definitely like not what I want to do with my life, be an administrative assistant. I definitely like have ideas what's next, but I'm very confident that it is going to be in ministry, whether that's here or across the country or the globe. I'm not entirely sure, so figuring all that out. Oh wait, I can't hear you anymore.
It's not a real podcast with me unless I mute myself at least once.
Okay, there we go. I can hear you.
So now it's a real podcast.
Great. It's official.
So like, gosh, you speak so well. Like ministry just seems to be like down your lane, right? This could be something. But let me ask you this. You said it several times in this podcast that CrossFit is all you ever knew. Mm-hmm. Like you gave up college to CrossFit. You did all these things. Do you need to kind of detox from that to help you hear more of what God has planned for you?
I would definitely say like, like we are like, I don't think CrossFit is bad. Like I definitely like want to like work out, like in some state or form. I'm still doing that, but like the time is way less and it's way more like devoted in the scripture and reading like books that like help me understand the scripture, and dive like deeper into it, watching like sermons. Like I spend like a lot of my time doing that, like going to, a bunch of different Bible studies throughout the week and just like spending like time with like the people that have really mentored me the most down here. And just trying to like read, study, say yes, still like now I'm trying to get back in the rhythm of like exercising a little bit more and saying yes to some of the things that God's just like putting my way as like I, figure things out.
Do you ever see yourself kind of around the CrossFit space doing these things without being an athlete, but maybe, I don't know, like leading a group of athletes?
Honestly, no, I don't like at all.
No.
I feel like
Okay.
if I wanted to coach, program, nutrition, none of that like appeals to me. Not like my coach, like Dom, he's the one that like reached me. So I believe, like I said, I really believe you can, whatever like vocation that you're in, like it can be used like for the glory of God. Like, you know, like we are made to like work and like working well and with joy. So like whatever job that you can be in, like can be done for his glory. I just really don't feel like CrossFit is my, like I don't have a desire to do that.
Okay. Yeah, Jody summed it up better than me, but you answered the CrossFit chaplain. And Kenneth says, I'm 33, still don't know what my calling is. Happens when he plans it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been really cool, like I said, just to see the intentionality of like God and how he's worked, like even like little conversations, like how every conversation has been pieced together, every move, every place I've like lived down here, the people that I've met, it's been very intentional. So that like past faithfulness has like really helped me like see like that same God that like did that, moved me to Naples, like called me to step away from CrossFit, led me to all those people. Like that's the same God now. And like his like past grace and faithfulness, like it is present and it is future as well.
So my former pastor, who regretfully moved away, loved him so much. He was a guy that like always put himself in situations where he could minister, whether it be like hanging out at the local coffee shop, whether it could, and not like intrusively,
Yeah.
but, was just kind of there. Are those things that you're doing? Cause I noticed like on Instagram, a lot of your posts are, hey, went to a coffee shop. Hey.
Yeah, so I really like going to coffee shop like to like read and like study and like get work done. And it's like so cool to see just like the people that have like come up to me. Just like, hey, like I see you in here a lot, like reading, like your Bible. And just like the relationships that have like been made that way. But I do honestly feel like sometimes like sharing your testimony and like witnessing to your neighbors is like the hardest thing to do. It can be like the scariest thing. It's like it's almost easier when you don't know the people because you have nothing to lose. But when you know the people and the people are close to you, like that's like when it can get hard. So even like, I like pray for courage and like boldness, like all of the time for that, but also just trying to like live my life in a way that like models Christ, like what I wear, like what I say, like the music that I listen to, like the things I post, like kind of how you're mentioning earlier. I want people to look at me and be able to know what I believe. And I've like just been able to like see that down here of like, I'm so happy Danielle and her podcast like called me part of the religious group. Like that's seen. Like I'm so happy when like I went to the coffee shop and like someone comes up to me and is like, hey, like I've seen you like reading, like where do you go to church? Just like the conversations, the like relationships like that have formed that way. And like the opportunities have flowed from that. That like person at the coffee shop like then offered me a job. She's like, hey, like we're hiring if you like want to join us. Or like now like the part-time I'm doing like at the Pregnancy Resource Center, like that came like through a relationship like I met like through church.
Yeah, he was such a good example for me because all the things you're talking about are things he would do. But like if a server came up to him,
Yeah.
he would genuinely want to know that person's name, how they're doing, how they're feeling. And he would start these conversations. And it's amazing how quickly people would
Yeah.
open up to him.
It's
Like
yeah.
God uses that so much.
I know I have a lot of like, I love like getting to like know people, like talking to, like the grocery store clerk, or just like getting to know people. But I also definitely need to get better at, if I already know the person, I can tend to try to maybe overly shove the gospel down their throat. My mom may chime in the comments at this point. Where I can get like very aggressive and like, like once you learn something, like a new like concept or doctrine, it's like, you're like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing. You just want everyone to know. So like comes from a place of love, but at times I can definitely get like overly passionate when it comes to like people I know. So it's just like continue like build into relationships, like little things like here and there. Not trying to like overwhelm people or like try to show that like I'm better than them in any way. Then yeah, just like people that I don't know, like building relationships to, or like writing letters, or like little things like that.
Yeah, again, very much like Paul, other than the killing Christian part.
Yes.
Yeah, like he became overzealous and he sent letters to everyone. He sent, he wrote half the New Testament
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
because of all of that. So you're in good company, right?
Oh yeah, we're going through Romans, like Bible study with like Emma, like my other friend Olivia, and then Harper. We're all going through Romans together, like verse by verse. We started in September and are just now entering 6. So very slow. In our church actually is doing like throughout this whole year, we're going through Romans like from January to December, like going through it. So like getting to like, so being compared to Paul is not accurate considering his wisdom he had. I want that wisdom. I am hungry for that wisdom.
Well, I don't think he had that wisdom right off the bat. I mean, no, he had to develop it over time. But the overzealousness at the initial, and all the things he did, you can't write half the New Testament and not be overzealous and an overachiever.
Yeah.
Well, Olivia, gosh, I could talk to you forever, but we try to keep these at an hour, so maybe we'll just have to have you back and do some other stuff with you about and spreading the word and the gospel. If you can hang on just 1 minute, I'm going to close out the show and then I'll chat with you and let you go for the night.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for jumping in and in the chat. Love you all. We'll talk to you soon. See you later on the Clydesdale Media Podcast.